All right, y'all, we're live.
Welcome. We're back on YouTube, live streaming.
Welcome to the ball game.
No? Yes.
Yeah.
Take me out to the ball game. No one knows the words.
I don't remember it. I don't remember that.
Well, this was all planned, and today we're super excited to be back here with you guys for our number blank live stream. I'm not entirely sure. I think we've done quite a few.
Many live streaming.
Definitely more than 15 or 10. So we are excited. Today we're going to be going over action and sports photography. So we're going to be moving. Yesterday was a good day. This is Adam.
Awesome.
This is Izzy, and we have some footage from an actual...
Veronica.
And Veronica, yes, sorry. What did we do today? Yesterday.
We actually went, like you said, on a field trip. We went to a Major League Baseball game, Marlins versus the Mets. Go Marlins. And they won.
Yeah.
And that was it was great because that was my first time at the stadium.
Me too.
So it was a great experience.
It's a great stadium. If you're ever in Miami, it's definitely one of those sites to visit. Have you guys ever been to a game? We want to hear from you today. As any other live stream, this is open for questions. So any questions you have, if you just want to say hi to the experts, the team, we're excited to see you guys. Anything on action and sports photography. Today we're going to be going over what camera we used, or Adam and Izzy used yesterday, and also we're going to be showing you some pictures. And hopefully we get a lot of questions from you so they can answer them and have a great 30 minutes of good
I am sure.
So
food for thought.
I think we have Christian live watching us from Italy.
From Italy, Italia.
Ooh.
Come stai?
That was good.
Yeah, that took me a while, but so I guess you guys want to get started already?
Well, I'm sure that there's got to be a lot of questions about how to do sports photography, especially we can't be the only ones that go to a baseball game. We saw plenty of people there. Didn't see too many people with cameras, but I know that there's some of you out there, you're going to take your camera, you're going to try to figure out.
Well, we got a lot of moms and dads that go out
Little
to take
League,
photos of their
Pee-wee
kids.
League, all those.
At their kids' baseball,
Right.
or any type of event.
Football, tennis,
ballet, any type of like karate, or any type of event where there's a lot of action. People either bring their phone.
Tennis.
Can't forget tennis. I'm gonna forget golf.
And soccer.
Soccer
moms.
Yep.
Exactly. So we've had a lot of people come into the store to buy cameras because they want to photograph their children playing, any type of sport or again event. So they're looking. Main question is, what's the best type of what camera works best, and what are some of the settings to go about capturing the image? So, Izzy, do you want to take?
Well, one thing that we were lucky here is that we got a hold of a Sony RX10 Mark.
Hand it over
II,
to the speaker.
Mark III. This guy has a 24 millimeter wide angle to a 600 millimeter telephoto, all in one pretty small package, considering that it is a fantastically fast camera. And we get a lot of people asking which is the best lens. It all really depends on where you're sitting. We were lucky enough that we had some great seats, so we were able to actually zoom in on the action from not a great deal of a distance. But let's say, for example, if you're at a football game where your child is playing, or you're a member of a yearbook staff and you're shooting for your favorite school, sometimes you might be right on the sideline, which we didn't have that chance. And again, you can work with a shorter optical lens, like something like a small zoom, like an 18 to 135,
right,
or anything like that. But the important thing is you want to make sure you're picking a faster shutter speed. Of course,
why do you want a faster shutter speed?
You want to make sure you freeze action. Now, if you want to be able to show an effect like some of the ones that we're going to show you there as an example, you want to work with a faster shutter speed so you can actually freeze the motion. Now, sometimes you might want to pick a little bit slower shutter speed to show actual movement, where that could be a much more creative or artistic way to show movement. It doesn't have to be a static image. Plus then, a lot of us are now into video. This guy, you were able to do a couple of 4K
we did
video clips with that, right?
The RX10 Mark III can record in 4K, but it can also do high speed, high frame rate recording, which is a cool feature. You see that in instant yeah, excuse me.
Instant replay.
You see that
Rewind.
during
Instant replay.
rewind. You see,
Edit that out.
You see that during instant replays where the action is replayed back in slow motion. So this camera, we recorded some clips at 240 frames per second, and it actually records it in 240 frames per second and slows it down to, I believe, like 30 frames, or 24 frames per second. But it's really cool if you want to get a glimpse of the action. Like the pitcher throws the ball out, the ball is going to the catcher, but you have the batter standing there swinging the bat, and once that ball and the bat connect,
and it all happens extremely fast.
It all happens extremely fast, and that's what high frame rate gives you the ability to see that in action.
Awesome.
It's what they do in Major League Baseball now. They finally understood that you have to do instant replay so you can go back and check whether it's a foul or whether they're safe. This is something that we can now do with our actual cameras.
Right. But you mentioned the shutter speed has to be a high shutter speed, but some people might not be still comfortable shooting manual, and that's where setting the camera on shutter priority. So on Nikon, if you have a Nikon camera, it's going to be S for shutter priority, and on Canon you're going to have a setting called TV. And that would allow you to set the camera's shutter speed. The camera will choose the aperture, and the ISO could be on auto. What we've noticed is that in order to get the fastest shutter speed to freeze the action, you need to use you're going to need to raise the ISO up to be able to achieve shutter speeds of like 1,000th of a second. Especially if you're limited on your aperture. So this has I think at the long end,
it's an f4.
It's an f4, but even f4 shooting indoors in a professionally lit stadium, I needed to shoot at an ISO of 3200 to be able to get fast enough shutter speed to freeze the action.
But I think most of today's cameras, whether they're DSLRs or hybrids like this, will allow you to go up to a high ISO like that. So you should be, and again, you also want to make sure you pick a faster shooting frame rate. You want to make sure it's not on single shot. You want to shoot it at continuous or high speed. And let's say you're not comfortable with picking shutter speed because you're not sure what you want to pick. Most of today's cameras have a scene mode that allows you to do sports imaging. And that allows you to set it to that, so it presets a predetermined shutter speed to ISO and aperture ratio depending on the lighting situation. Again, it's not the one that's going to guarantee the shot every single time, but it is a starting point if you're a novice or a beginner and you don't want to experiment.
Right.
Okay, we do have a few questions in. So I wasn't sure if to do questions first or a glimpse of what we shot yesterday at the game, but we'll go ahead and do the questions first in case you want to get your answers fast, which we know you do. So someone is asking if they're shooting at high speed, does IS matter as much? I'm not sure if you guys have answered some of these already, but just go over.
Do they mean ISO or image stabilization?
Probably, I think they're talking about image stabilization.
Yes.
That's a great question.
Very good.
And typically, if you're using long lenses, most of the time you're using either a monopod or a tripod to stabilize that camera. But with image stabilization needs to, and this is optical image stabilization. Sometimes if your camera shoots 10 frames per second, the image stabilization might not be able to reactuate to, 10 frames per second. Usually it can actuate, from shot to shot, but it might not be able to adjust for the high frame rate, especially if you're going to hold your finger, kind of like spray and pray, like just,
burst.
Do a burst. So I would say, probably I would turn image stabilization off, just because if you're shooting at a very high shutter speed, it should compensate for handshake. And if you have your camera on a monopod, you probably don't want to have that stabilization system on it anyways, because that actually might affect the image quality.
The image quality, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Let's show some of those photos, and then we'll keep going through. Keep your questions coming. I know that I have a couple that I have already noted for later after, so we want to try to go through a few of the pictures from the actual game. Maybe leave the best one for last. I don't know how many Adam has in store for us.
I have a few images.
Okay, just make sure you show us the best one last.
That's the one me throwing out the ball? No.
That's
Throw out the
Izzy.
first pitch.
Izzy got on the field, and he actually won the game for the Marlins, and it was awesome.
Our man Stanton pulled it through again.
I think there were about 4 home runs in one inning by the Marlins.
That was
which
incredible.
Is pretty incredible.
That was great, and I didn't honestly expect the Marlins to win. And go Marlins! Obviously, we live in Miami, but that was a great game. I don't know if we brought good luck or maybe we did, right? Yeah, I think it was
the whole
definitely
Goja crew out there.
Yeah. So
we're gonna actually
or do we have the picture on the screen?
Yeah, we have the picture on the screen.
Okay.
So this is actually. Let me just adjust. And we have. Actually, we don't. We're experiencing some
technical difficulties.
So we're gonna try to fix that, but I guess we can.
While Adam goes ahead and tries to fix that, we'll go ahead and keep answering questions.
Yep.
We'll have Izzy talk and answer some questions.
People are saying hi from. We have someone from Bolivia saying hi. Woo-hoo. Thank you. Someone from Jersey, Channel Islands, Detroit, Coral Springs, Kendall, West Kendall. Yes,
Kendall,
hello.
represent.
What's up? So,
305.
what would you say is? Do you have any suggestions for water sports? Does it change? You know, if you're at a ski.
Here's the thing.
Ski.
Most of the time, if you're recording water sports, you're going to be on the shore somewhere, and your subject matter is going to be at a greater distance. I get a lot of people showing up at the showroom, and they're like, "Wow, you know, my son, my friend, my fiance, my better half." They do a lot of surfing and water skiing and so forth, and I want to be able to capture that. And that's where the larger telephoto zooms come into play, where you need to work with something 300 millimeters or more, or you have to have a camera that's a full frame with a higher megapixel so you could do some cropping. But the best case scenario is try to work with something at a 300 millimeter or more so you have the capability of bringing in the subject matter optically. And again, you're now dealing with fast moving subject matter, especially when they're on a surfboard or jet skiing. The subject matter is going to be coming by at a high rate. So you want to work with that faster shutter speed to be able to freeze the action.
Someone's really mad out there.
It's Miami traffic. What do you want?
And you just reminded me of something, Izzy. So we're talking about sports photography, but also action photography. And action, it could be any kind of action.
Anything
it could be someone jumping jacks or on one of these trampoline boards or
the kids in a jump house.
Yes.
One of those
bounce
houses.
What would you say is the most asked question you get from people that come into the showroom that, like moms, for example?
Yeah. I mean, they'll come in here and they'll be like, what camera do I have to get? A very particular camera if I want to be able to stop action of my child playing or in the playground or doing something as simple as just riding a bike. No, believe it or not, you don't have to go out and buy something expensive or something that's going to call for more elaborate equipment. You could do it just as something as simple as some of the smaller pocket or hybrid cameras that are out there, and all you have to do is you have to keep an eye on your shutter speed. That's the main point that we're trying to get across, is you want to make sure you pick a fast enough shutter speed so you can stop the action and show movement.
Well, actually, now we got it working. So
hey, and look, there's a perfect example.
We'll show you a perfect example of why you need a fast shutter speed. And right here, if you can see, I have this photo, and I don't remember which player. I can't read the name on the player, but
it's not from the Marlins.
No, that's definitely one of the Mets.
One of my hometown rivals.
Yep.
So this is a good example of why choosing the right settings would help. you have a ball that can be moving. Pitchers can throw it up to 90, or 100 miles an hour, and the player swinging the bat, you can see that the parts of the player that below the hip, his legs aren't moving very fast. So the shutter speed that was chosen is able to freeze that, and you can see his upper body and his head, and his arm are sharp. But if you look at his hand and the bat, you see that there's motion blur. And obviously the ball, you can't really tell. It's a ball because it's a baseball game, and that's what's going to be coming into the frame. But the shutter speed wasn't fast enough, and we can go into the file info, and I can see that this is 1/400th of a second. Now 1/400th of a second is fast enough to freeze most, like, people walking.
Right.
If somebody's standing there and you want to make sure you don't get handshake, that's fast enough. But 400th of a second is not fast enough to freeze this type of action. And we're also at a great distance, but since we're filling a frame with the subject matter, this is any type of motion is going to be
well, it's going to
the
be
motion
much
blur
more
is going to be
exaggerated.
more apparent. So with this, what we found is that you would need a shutter speed at least 1,000th of a second, at least at minimum. And
I
this.
love how the player is what you were saying. I can see all the details on his helmet and the shirt. You can read New York, but he looks like he's just standing there.
And you can tell that he's doing what his batting coach, told him to keep an eye on the ball.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you can see, exactly that his head, he's pointing down, his eyes. But if we use the faster shutter speed, we would have been able to freeze the action. Now, again, you can set the camera either in manual, or you can shoot in shutter priority, and that's the two modes that I would recommend when shooting sports photography or action, is because you'll have control of the settings, and you'll know whether or not you want to show action or freeze action. So I would here I'll check to see what exactly mode we were in, and it looks like we were in aperture priority. And in aperture priority, you control the aperture that the camera sets, and then the camera selects the shutter speed. So at that particular ISO, it was able to choose 1/400th of a second, but the camera really is dumb in the sense that it does not know that it's
that you have
it doesn't
a moving
have
subject matter.
It doesn't have the artificial intelligence yet to know that it's a moving subject, that the person behind the camera wants you to freeze the action. So in this respect, we should have set the camera to shutter priority or manual instead of the fastest shutter that we can do and the highest ISO that we can use without degrading that much image quality. So that's a good example of why you need to keep an eye on the camera settings when taking the photo. And I know we can go to another image. And again, you can see here again the same thing is that there's motion blur. Both the bat, you can even see that the bat is kind of bending, and that could be straight lines could bend depending on like the frame rate. You get what's called rolling shutter, especially if it's an electronic shutter. But again, you see that the ball is not completely sharp in the frame. But if we move to the final image that we have to show, and that's going to be of the pitcher, and now
Wow,
we
that's
can tell that
sharp.
the shutter speed's fast enough to freeze the action. You can even see the stitching on the ball. It's frozen. His left arm is frozen as well as his throwing arm is frozen.
Yeah, and he averages about 94 miles an hour per
Right.
pitch, so that's stopping movement there for sure.
So that's kind of like the basics. Wish we had it's sports photography, especially baseball. It's very difficult to get that really top of the line photograph. It takes a lot of You need to be able to tell when the peak action's happening. You have to really know baseball, and that's what I find.
You want to put that photo back on the screen? I feel like we're all it's a great picture, and it looks. I think it's hard to understand how far we were from this player unless you were there, but we weren't that close. I mean, we were.
I think we were in section 9.
Yeah. I mean,
So
we were
we were-
close to the
We were up.
field, but we weren't close to him. You know?
Right.
It
So
was still.
we were sitting on the first base line, section 9, row 9, I believe, which is fairly close to the action. But we were using the RX10, which has a 600 millimeter lens. So I made sure to, pretty much zoom in as much as I could, and that's how I was able to get this image. And when you're watching the game.
Sorry. When you're watching the game.
When you're watching the game, the camera operators are actually using very, very long lenses to be able to show and fill the frame with.
Oh yeah,
as
we were
much
sitting
detail
out there
as
going,
possible.
"Hey, look, there's a 600. Look, there's a 400 to 8." Pointing them out back and forth as they were walking around the dugouts.
So we have a good question here. It's a
Sure.
two-part question. Which would be the best lens for long shooting and short shooting? For example, shooting the catcher and then shooting the outfielder in low lighting without getting the noise. So it's two lenses.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
So I've known a lot of sports photographers, and if you watch the sports photographers on the field, most of the time they're going to have 2 cameras or 3, maybe they're going to have multiple cameras.
There were a couple.
So they're going to have cameras that they can set, and they can even have remote cameras set on home plate and a camera set in the outfield, because what I find it's very difficult to try to move from plate to outfield.
That's a big perspective jump.
One, you have to be able to anticipate where the ball is going to go. So if you have the ability to have multiple cameras, you can have a shorter. If you're closer to home plate, which most of the time you are, unless you're situated in the outfield. But obviously, this is a 600 millimeter lens. You would need at least, like something like a 100 to 400 or a 150 to 600. If you have a lot of money, that's where you can get long glass that has a fast aperture, and you would need something. If you don't want to use a very high ISO, you're going to have a lens that can open up to f2.8 at least, and you're not going to find that on lenses that come at a very cheap price.
Definitely won't be affordable, number one, and you also have to take into consideration it will be pretty heavy equipment to lug around.
And we were shooting inside a stadium that has a roof.
That was another question. Which is the best lens in a stadium?
Inside a stadium, you're gonna want something. Canon has a 400 millimeter 5.6. That's going to be the most affordable telephoto lens that has somewhat. It's 5.6 is not a large aperture, but any zoom lens that's 150 to 150 to 600, you're looking at 6.3 at the long end. So if you're doing something where you don't need, you're photographing action where you're not far from the subject. And
I'll show you an example. I'll be right back.
You'd want a 70-200 f2.8 would be the most ideal lens, and you can get teleconverters to extend the focal length. But what a teleconverter does is, yes, it extends the focal length, but then it cuts the aperture down. So it cuts the amount of light that's going to pass through to hit the sensor. So it's a give or take. But
or you walk around with something like this.
Izzy brings out one of our favorite lenses to show people in the showroom.
This is the closing.
And this is
wow.
This is Sigma's 500 millimeter f4. So as I said, the Sony camera that we were shooting out has a 600 millimeter f4. This is a 500 f4 for a DSLR, a full frame. How much does this cost, Izzy? I think $5,999.
Just short.
This is what you usually see news photographers or journalists shooting with at a game, right?
Right. Either like a 600 millimeter f4 from either Canon or Nikon. 300-2.8 is a popular
This
lens.
feels like a rocket.
But or Nikon or Canon has, for what, $18,000, you can buy the 800 millimeter 5.6.
5.6, yeah. So
But
again,
usually-
if money's no object, sure. But then I've always said the best lens is the one that's with you. Imagine
Right.
you're going to take this to your child's baseball game.
Right.
Yeah.
I had someone come in and buy stuff like this for their kids. They bought a D4. They bought a 400-2.8. But as Izzy said, the best lens is the lens that you have in your camera bag. And you got to be able. You just got to be able to utilize what you have. You got to understand all the principles of photography. You got to understand, that if your lens goes to 400 and you're limited on your aperture, raise your ISO. And just understand that your image quality is gonna
Triangle.
Your triangle. Your image quality might not be the best, but you'll be able to freeze the
Capture
action.
moment.
Yeah.
Capture the moment.
Catch our live stream from not last week, but the week before, where we went over ISO, aperture, and shutter speed in detail. And we showed actual pictures, and we went over a bunch of, it was like a 101 beginner guide to that. So if you have questions on that, please make sure to follow up on that with our live stream. And every Thursday we're here 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 2:30 Pacific.
Thank
It was
you all.
great seeing you guys,
Thank you all for
and
tuning in. You all
leave you with
are the
this
ones
beautiful-
that are make it happen.
Yeah.
And we're glad to share
Thumbs
everything
up,
that we
thumbs
know,
up
and we
for more
learn
live streams.
And we learned from all you with all your, all the great questions. So
we love the questions.
Thank you.
Please keep them coming.
Keep them coming. If you have questions that were not answered, you can post them below when the video gets posted, and the team will answer them for you. So we'll see you guys next time.
Until next time. Happy
Bye.
shooting.
Next one.
Happy shooting. Oh, that's his thing.